This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
Reaction Monday. Tell us all about it.
Jim Foley caught at the 21-yard line. Xavier Leggett with back-to-back catches, and he's got the Gamecocks inside the 25.
Sponsored by Carolina Honda Powerhouse, your local Honda superstore for motorcycles, ATVs, side-by-sides, scooters, and generators. CarolinaHonda.com.
Your home of the Gamecocks in the Midlands. 107.5 The Game. Also heard on the Grand Strand at 100.3 The Game. And in the PD at 100.5 The Game in Florence.
Go to work and goes down the field, left side. And it's going at the 35-yard line. And it's Leggett running away for the second one of the night. Touchdown Carolina. Touchdown Xavier Leggett. Are you kidding me? Boom, 75 yards. Shocked the Bulldogs on the first play of the second half. The extra point will make it 27-17.
Welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Here on Reaction Monday, Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell along with you. That, of course, was Todd Ellis on the call for the Gamecocks Radio Network. The bomb of a touchdown to start the second half from Spencer Rattler to Xavier Leggett to open up the lead to 27-17 at that point. And again, South Carolina continued to control the game from there, going on to the 37-30 victory. And Wes, we talked a lot about Spencer Rattler in that last hour and the great job that he did on Saturday night, going 18 of 20 for 288 yards and 3 touchdowns. But Xavier Leggett, man, coming into the season, we knew he was in for probably a pretty good season. I don't think we expected him to be the leading receiver in the nation through 4 games, 556 yards on a season, 3 total touchdowns, 189 yards, and 2 of those touchdowns coming on Saturday night against Mississippi State.
I think anytime you hear about a guy and, hey, he's had a great preseason, this guy's had a great summer, he's done everything we've asked. You hear all those things. And then, sometimes you get into the season and it doesn't always translate. And then other times it does translate, but it's kind of exactly what you thought. Like, hey, he's a good number 2 receiver. I mean, coming into, let's rewind all the way back to like January, South Carolina's bringing in Eddie Lewis, a transfer senior. You're saying, hey, Juice Wells is going to start, and then you got these 2 other spots, and you're probably saying Eddie Lewis or Marion Brown or Xavier Leggett. Like two of those guys are gonna fill out, the other 2 spots, but then the third will kind of come off the bench maybe. And then, I thought our first sign was kind of that AB and Leggett pretty much were just like, nah, man, like we're starting. Like it felt like there was never a question. If we're healthy, we're playing, we're starting. But as far as could anybody predict he would go from being a guy who, I think struggled a little bit with some confidence last year, and, you had the 2 drops at SC State that immediately turned into interceptions, and just to take that and turn it into what we've seen, which I would love to know what the NFL scouts are thinking at this point, because by my eyes, we're seeing, conservatively, a top 3 round guy right now. Maybe higher. I don't know. Like he's got the size. Mm-hmm. He's gonna run. When I say he's gonna run a good time. He's gonna run what you're looking for. There really aren't going to be any dings as far as like all the physical, measurable check mark stuff that they look at.
Sure.
And then, the football speed itself, like that first play, he ran away from those guys.
Yeah,
like,
it was just a simple crossing route, and he just turned on the jets and went the rest of the way.
What was the reaction in the press box when he ran it? Like, was there there was a gasp around me, and there's oh my, like.
Yeah, pretty similar because, again, it's kind of one of those plays that, going over the middle typically gets you, when you're between 8 to 15 yards, and he just, again, turned on that extra gear and just ran away from everybody. And, again, we know how fast he is, but I think we were all still pleasantly surprised to see how that play turned out.
Yeah, like we know how fast he is, but you still don't expect that explosiveness against a fellow SEC defense. You know, like maybe he runs away from Furman, you're impressed, but you're like, okay, he's just a level above. He was a level above them as well. So, I mean, he's done it time after time. And what about the versatility of him as a receiver?
Mm-hmm.
We put some guys in a box. Oh, this is a jump ball receiver. Oh, this is a run after the catch receiver. I don't know if he's missed a quote 50-50 ball yet. He's had multiple 50-50 ball catches. Then you throw in what he's done after the catch. They used him in the running game as well.
Though that technically counts as a pass because it was forward, but yeah, the sweep's still a run play.
That's a running play as far as everything except the official stats. I feel like but it does help Rattler's numbers very well. So
absolutely,
he finished 5 catches, 189 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, 38, almost 38 yards per catch.
And, you talked about this in the last hour. South Carolina was definitely very committed to getting the running game going, and there were several situations where Rattler checked into a running play on what would have normally been a pass. So if they were more concerned with throwing the ball and, Rattler had 30 attempts or 35 attempts, like, who knows what Leggette's numbers could have been at the end of the night.
Yeah, man, and I thought it felt like to me we saw a lot of too high safeties from Mississippi State, kind of almost daring South Carolina to run the football, and then they obviously did. And I think there's progress there, obviously, but would you like to, Anderson ran the ball 26 times, 88 yards, a touchdown, 3.4 yards per carry. You'd still like to see a little bit more. You'd like to break off one of those. Generally, your rushing stats look good when you break off a run or two. Mario Anderson's long was still 9 yards. That was on the touchdown, the toss play.
Mm-hmm.
That was maybe one of the best plays of the night.
By the way, shout out to the old school toss sweep.
Oh, hey, old school.
George Rogers would be proud of that.
I was going to say your boy Mike Bobo would be.
Hey, he still runs it.
Would be proud of that one, Tyler. But that was somewhat fitting.
Sure.
As much as they had tried to establish the run, that you finish it off. And you got solid initial blocking on that thing. The beautiful thing about that toss play is you got decent initial blocking, but then you had a little surge from Mario Anderson, so he keeps the play going. And then you're going, all right, everybody's got to just shove our guy in, And so there are very few things that get a crowd and an O-line and an offense more fired up than you got everybody just kind of rugby scrum, just slam my guy into the end zone. That had to be a pretty cool moment for an offense that has struggled to run the football and an offensive line that, let's be honest, has kind of taken the brunt of the criticism about this team. And so that was pretty special, and the crowd obviously loved it as well.
Absolutely, and good to finally see some balance come to this offense, which you're definitely going to need going forward, especially when you talk about this next slate of games where, by the way, as of right now, the latest AP poll, all 3 of your next opponents are ranked, and you go on the road to Texas A&M after playing Missouri. So definitely a tough slate of games coming up. But kind of going back to Xavier Leggett and the receiving core, you don't want to say that you have almost not noticed Juice Wells being out there, but this emergence of Xavier Legette gives you so much confidence in what this pass game is right now. Whenever you get Juice Wells back 100% healthy, maybe by the Florida game coming off the bye week, you just talk about the dynamic of having both those guys on either side of the field. Like, I can only imagine how much better the pass game is going to be then.
Well, I think throw in, can you continue to get just a little bit out of the running game? I think that's why it was so important for them to keep working on it on Saturday night, because if you add Juice back in, Juice and Legette, opposite sides, you're going to have to continue to see those two high safety looks, or they're going to, 17 and 3 are going to hammer you. Throw in AB if you can get him healthy. I think the last couple of weeks will be big for these other guys who have gotten PT. Omega Blake's been solid for you. Luke Doty's made some plays for you. Eddie Lewis has actually been really good in the open field, I feel like. So you keep building depth at receiver, but certainly, what Juice Wells did for you last year, we can't forget that. And so you put 17 out there with Wells and then some semblance of a running game with Rattler continuing to play. I think that's where you're sort of saying, if you're looking at this season as, all right, these next games, what are we down to, 8 games left now?
Yep.
If these next 8 games can go either way for the most part, I'd probably say you should beat Jacksonville State, you should beat Vanderbilt. Then the other 6, you're just like toss up, and some of them are toss up, maybe a little skewed to South Carolina, but for the most part, they're going to be toss up but skewed. Like Tennessee's a 10-point, 11-point, depending on where you look, favorite in this game. Florida, they come to Columbia, but still.
I mean, I think our opinions on Florida and Tennessee kind of flipped when they played each other last week, and you saw what Florida could do running the ball. Now you do have a little bit more confidence coming away from Saturday night that South Carolina was able to stop Mississippi State's running attempt. Like, okay, maybe you can kind of quell the running that Florida's going to be able to do. And obviously you do have concerns going into Tennessee this weekend with not being able to stop Mississippi State's passing attack, knowing that what Tennessee's going to do. But like you said, while South Carolina may not necessarily be favored in all these games going forward, they at least have a decent chance in every single one of them if they continue to play the way they've been playing.
Yeah, and obviously Vegas doesn't quite overreact to games the way we all probably do. They still have Tennessee as a double-digit favorite this week. Florida, I don't know if we should overreact to what Florida did to Tennessee. I think right now Florida's probably favored.
Probably.
Against South Carolina, but being at home.
I'd say it's probably somewhere between 3 and 7 points. I think it's going to be tight.
Yes. Missouri all of a sudden sitting there number 23 in the country.
4-0, man. I keep waiting for them to trip up on somebody. They haven't done it yet.
So, I feel like all these games are kind of like attack them when they get there, even in terms of what the true expectation should be.
Sure.
But if you're South Carolina, it's going to take continued progress from the running game.
Right.
And it's going to take, eventually, you hope you get Juice Wells back. And if you do that, I mean, Tyler, I think we would be sitting here talking about a historic South Carolina offense if they didn't have guys banged up the way they have.
Definitely so. And again, hopefully get those guys back soon. This offense can continue to improve and expand the numbers that they've already been able to put up. One of the big takeaways from Saturday night was a little bit more cohesion on the offensive line. Talk about that coming up. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour on Reaction Monday, presented by Firehouse Subs here on the Game.
For over 3 decades, nobody has had a wrestling career like Arn Anderson. Conrad Thompson gets all the stories with Arn.
Would you rather take the cactus bump from the apron to the floor or give Ric Flair your debit card pin?
Number one, I don't have a debit card, but if you think I'd give him my American Express.
Yeah, there you go. Same thing.
I've been poor most of my adult life up until about the age of 25. I cannot be poor again.
Check out Arn every week, wherever you listen.
It's Reaction Monday.
Sponsored by Carolina Honda Powerhouse. CarolinaHonda.com.
Your home of the Gamecocks in the Midlands. 107.5 The Game. Also heard on the Grand Strand at 100.3 The Game. And in the PD at 100.5 The Game in Florence.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Here on a Reaction Monday, Tyler and Wes, along with you, reacting to the Gamecocks' 37-30 win over Mississippi State on Saturday night. And one thing that we saw that we've been really waiting this entire season for is a little bit more cohesion on that offensive line. You only had 6 guys rotate in. The only spot that had multiple guys play at it on Saturday night was the right guard spot, as Ja'Kai Moore was a little bit banged up. Trevon Ball getting a good amount of snaps there at the right guard position. Now, if Moore was maybe fully healthy, you probably would have seen him at right tackle. They had Wanamaker slide back in over there, and overall, the entire offensive line unit played really, really well and has certainly improved tremendously from where they were in week number 1 against North Carolina.
Yeah, I think you probably just call it incremental progress and continuing to kind of just battle as you go. And, you know, I think that's a position where cohesiveness is such a big part of success on the offensive line. And I go all the way back to kind of the beginning of the year, preseason. They talked quite a bit about sense of urgency and wanting to be in a position to kind of have your offensive tackle settled. And, you know, we talked about left tackle and right tackle being up for grabs and kind of wondering who was going to step up and grab those 2 spots. It certainly felt like there was some confidence in Case and Henry taking that right tackle spot and kind of running with it. And then, you know, you kind of said, well, all hands on deck for left tackle. And obviously, Case and Henry gets hurt at right tackle 4 snaps into the season on offense. And now both spots are kind of up for grabs again. I think you got to give a ton of credit to Tree Babalade. He has helped to sort of solidify that left tackle spot. And, you know, are there going to be some growing pains there playing a freshman? Are there going to be some situations there where, you know, there are issues? Of course. But I think having a guy with the upside that Tree has and just saying, look, we're going to just roll with this guy and let him learn as he goes. He will gradually get better. There's nothing better than experience. And if you're Tree, you've now faced Georgia at Georgia. Obviously, great atmosphere, number 1 team in the country, 2-time defending champion. And now you've played in a great home atmosphere as well. You've played against a different front now. You've faced 2 completely different schemes, really. And so I think every snap, every game that a freshman like that plays, he's only going to get better. So you kind of lock down that spot. And so now if you're on the left side, Tree, Gargiulo, and then Vershawn at center, those guys now know who's going to be beside them every game. Vershawn knows who's going to be to his left. It's going to be Gargiulo every game. Gargiulo knows who's going to be to his left and right. And Tree knows he's got a veteran from Yale to his right every single game. So I think that cohesiveness, that continuity plays up on the offensive line. You know, I remember several of those O-line groups under Spurrier that early on, you know, you even had walk-ons mixed in. Early on, really struggled, and then you kind of saw the benefit as a season progressed of just playing the same 5 guys or playing most of the same 5 guys, and you want to be making personnel-wise more tweaks as opposed to wholesale changes. And I think that's where they are right now. I think right tackle continues to be up for grabs. I think your hope, if you're South Carolina, is that Tro Ball can kind of now take over that right guard spot, and then you just have several guys fighting it out for right tackle. So now you're kind of slowly sort of checking the boxes. 3 of your 5 positions are locked down. If Ball can lock down right guard, now you can say 4 of your 5 positions are locked down. And then ultimately you hope, whether it's Ja'Kai Moore, who actually didn't, really play right tackle on Saturday, but can Tyshawn Wanamaker, who played, I think, every snap at right tackle. Obviously, you still have Sidney Fugar in the mix there. Jackson Hughes apparently is in the mix there now, too, according to Shane Beamer. But what you want to do is just let those guys gel together, come together. And I think by the middle of the year, you maybe just have your 5 and you stick with it and go from, kind of go from there. But I really, going back to something we talked about in the first hour since I've been on, this to me felt like South Carolina had the big picture in mind with their game plan against Mississippi State. Could they have gone out there and thrown the ball 50 times and maybe put up more points than they did? I think there's a case to be made for that. But I think knowing the competition you have ahead, 3 straight top 25 teams, it gets a little bit easier, I feel like, than obviously facing Georgia on the road, but it doesn't get much easier. And knowing that all these games are winnable or losable, you are going to have to find a way to keep developing the running game. So I think South Carolina went into this game saying, yeah, Rattler could throw for 450 yards and we maybe even put up more points. But if we're going to, it is not sustainable to let Spencer Rattler get hit time after time after time and have no semblance of the running game. So I think they just went in and said, look, we're going to run the football. And even if we're struggling to run the football, we're going to just keep pounding away and see what happens. And, Tyler, to get back to a guy specifically that we talked about a little bit in the first hour I was in, but maybe deserves a little more talk, Mario Anderson, he's given you a little something additional at that running back spot that I think could be sustainable, and I think that South Carolina will try to build on top of moving forward.
Definitely so. And you look, Mario Anderson's, that's his natural position, playing running back. Of course, he put up all those yards and touchdowns when he was at Newberry. So the fact that he's kind of emerged as the better, more natural running back through the first couple games makes a lot of sense. And that's no knocking to Kerryon Joyner. It's just not his natural position. Now, he is better at pass protection, which was one of the key reasons why maybe Mario Anderson was not getting the amount of touches he should have gotten through those first couple of games. Kerryon Joyner is certainly going to play a role in the running back position going forward because his ability to catch things out of the backfield and make some plays that way. But when you talk about running between the tackles and powering up the middle, Mario Anderson's definitely your guy. Has that bowling ball type of running back stature. He, after the game, talked about some running backs that inspired him growing up, Marshawn Lynch being one of them, and you can definitely see those similarities in the way that they run the ball. And yeah, while the offensive line's still coming along and certainly aren't opening up those gaping holes, Mario Anderson being that bully type of running back can get you those 2 to 3 extra yards when you need them, and that stuff certainly adds up like it did on Saturday night.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It adds up. Typically, you hope, and I thought Carolina actually ran the ball a little bit better in the first half, but you kind of hope that your guy starts to break off a run or two in the second half once that defense sort of gets worn down as a game progresses. But we'll see if that can be the next step in the evolution of this running game. I think one negative, but also it's potentially a positive too, because it's one of those things that there's still room for improvement. As good as he was, I actually thought he was he narrowly missed on several runs where you're saying he was one step away from breaking off a much bigger, there were yards that were left on the field. There were a couple of times where I couldn't tell if he got tripped by linemen or if he himself tripped, but I thought there were more yards to be had, is my point. So he was grinding out and getting you some yards when they weren't there at times, but then on the flip side, there were some times where the line had blocked for yardage that he just didn't quite get. So I think that is another one of the next steps is can you break off a couple of these runs and create some chunk plays? The longest run, still 9 yards if you take out Spencer Rattler scrambles, in this game.
Definitely so. And again, a balanced offensive attack is definitely going to be key if you want to win some of these big games that are coming up against ranked teams over these next couple of weeks. There were certainly concerns on the defensive side, especially when it comes to the secondary, but hats off to the defensive front because they had quite a game on Saturday night. We'll talk about that a little bit coming up. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on a Reaction Monday here on The Game.
So, I mean, to start getting to the quarterback, we have to stop the run first. So, I mean, when we're doing that and offense is scoring and defense stopping the run, we're going to put the other team in that position to really go get out to the quarterback. So stop the run first and go have some fun.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Here on a Reaction Monday, Tyler and Wes, along with you, Chris, will rejoin us a little bit later on in the week. That was the voice of Jordan Strawn talking after the game on Saturday about the improvements that he's seen from the defense through these first couple of games. And Strawn himself had a good game on Saturday night with 1 sack, 3 tackles for losses, and including that forced fumble late there in the second half of the game. The defensive front as a whole played really well, had a good game out of Boogie, Tonka Hemingway in there for some pass deflections as well. Like for a unit that, again, going back to that North Carolina game, seemed to get bullied off the ball every single snap. They've made great improvements, and you like what you're seeing as you start heading into the thick of SEC play over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I thought Strawn looked like his old self, honestly. We talked earlier about the strip sack that created a fumble. Obviously, just dipping his shoulder, getting around the edge, using his length, using his explosiveness. And he's kind of quietly, I think, played pretty well this year. The PFF grades back that up too, but I think you've started to see a little bit more of that game-breaking ability from him that made him actually one of the top sackers in the country when he was at Georgia State. Led the country for most of that year. And, I think this entire defensive front, TJ Sanders, I mean, I think we are seeing him develop into being a difference maker up front. That I mentioned earlier that I was listening to Cole Kubelik's podcast on the way in, and Cole's a big ugly. He watches the lines of scrimmage, former offensive lineman, and he was kind of saying TJ is emerging as maybe a little bit more of a household name, among people who really pay attention in the SEC. So I think you have 3 guys there: Boogie making plays, Tonka making plays, TJ Sanders, Jordan Strawn. I thought JT Gear in his limited snaps, I think he's still dealing with that injury. Kind of got aggravated there a little bit. It sounded like going in, but he's a difference maker. If they can ever get him back 100%, then he can make some plays for you too. So I think stock up on the defensive front. You'd like to see a little bit more pressure on, Rodgers consistently in the game. They got a good bit of pressure late, and definitely played very well against the run. And let's add in the backers to this. I thought let's give credit to Stone Blanton. There, he had his detractors after the Georgia game. Mm-hmm. I didn't think UGA was his best game ever. I thought Stone played really well on Saturday against Mississippi State, and textbook punch out on that forced fumble that South Carolina very nearly was able to recover. They couldn't quite. That would have been a game-changing play there as well.
And something encouraging from the linebacker spot, just looking at the snap counts that Chris put up on Gamecock Central a little bit earlier, you finally were able to get Debo and Stone a fair amount of rest. Debo Williams playing 57 snaps, Snow playing 52, Bub Howard getting in for 19, and Bam Martin Scott getting in for 15. That's been the concern at that linebacker spot, is getting enough rotation in there to where you're not killing a guy like Debo playing 80 snaps a game. So you saw a fair amount of that on Saturday night, which again is going to benefit you going forward.
I think that's a good sort of balance to playing your best and like keeping them on the field versus playing them every single snap. And some of that is going to be just game dependent, and I think the way South Carolina ran the football a little bit more and stayed on the field a little bit more, although you did have some big splash plays too, that allowed your defense some just natural rest that probably wasn't there against Georgia. But, just playing, in Debo's case, 57 snaps instead of what would have been like 75
I think it was 72 total.
72 total. I mean, that's just that little extra rest. Or, Tyler, I would even say just having the option to have that rest. Like, it doesn't even have to be built in. It can just be, hey, I'm a little bit winded.
Sure.
Let's feel comfortable
right.
going to the next guy that he's going to be just fine. I think Bam Martin Scott was probably still just dealing with being a little bit dinged up early on. You're seeing him come along. They actually, one thing I noticed, they seem to like Bam Martin Scott in coverage quite a bit. If you watched on third down on passing situations, you see them get number 22 in at linebacker. So he is more of the space guy there, I think. And then Pup, he's a freshman. He's going to continue to come along. But those guys, Pup playing 19 snaps, Bam Martin Scott playing 15 snaps. That's that's just enough time for those guys to kind of catch their breath when needed.
And, of course, the secondary didn't look great on Saturday night. Will Rogers going for 487. Of course, we know Tulu Griffin putting up an ungodly amount of yards, especially in that first half. Didn't do quite as much in that second half there, but that's something that definitely needs to improve, especially as you look at a Tennessee team this weekend that was going to attack that secondary with a guy like Joe Milton, who obviously loves to throw the ball, and that Josh Heupel offense, which we saw up close and personal last year when Tennessee did come into Williams-Brice Stadium. So definitely some concern there, and you're definitely missing your two now NFL corners in Cam Smith and Darius Rush, but that's something that certainly needs some improvement as we get through these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I do think there's a lot on film that they'll be able to kind of go back into and correct. Like, I don't think these are just uncorrectable mistakes. Like, I think there's a lot that can be shored up there, and I don't have the exact targets in front of me, but a good bit of what they were able to exploit was more nickel/safety, I feel like. So it felt to me like Marcellus Dow held up for the most part. They got him, I think, on one of the PIs there at one point where he got a little handsy. But, I think for the most part, your corners have played okay. O.D. Fortune, he was banged up. Judge Collier continues to come on as a true freshman. Not a highly recruited guy. This was a camp evaluation, camp offer situation. He's come along. He's kind of your third corner right now. So I think, but, corners have been fine. This is not quite the Tennessee passing attack we saw last year. Like, the receivers aren't quite as good, and Joe Milton has just not been as consistently accurate, in my opinion, as Hendon Hooker was last year. So they got a lot to clean up, but I think they're going to be fine going into this week. We'll see if they can make progress with that being clearly a huge focus. Torian Gray, man, this guy is, I can't say enough good things about him. I think he's one of the best in the entire business at getting his secondary ready. So I think those guys will be challenged this week to take a step forward. And I just generally, when you look at a group that's talented like they are, that has a bad game, you see a bounce back week. Yep. And I think we'll see a good bit of that going into Tennessee.
Quickly here, just wanted to note on this, we still have not seen that, I'd say, perfect special teams game out of South Carolina just yet this season. You obviously had the missed 2-point conversion there that South Carolina tried in the first half on Saturday. One of Kai Kroger's punts was a bit of a knuckleball. Like, for the standard of South Carolina special teams, I don't think they've quite lived up to it through the first 4 games, and obviously haven't run too many fakes or anything like that. But from South Carolina's standpoint, not where you want to be necessarily with special teams through 4 weeks.
I think it shows you how high the expectations are there. And, Pete Limbo talked about it last week, that the way he said it is they hoped by this point in the year that you're on DEF instead of doing your ABCs. And so they've had to go back and kind of maybe reteach a little bit. He did sort of warn us. Look, I got a lot of new faces on special teams, whether that is because my guys like Jalen Brooks, Darius Rush, I think Cam Smith's involved on special teams last year. Several guys that were very good on special teams have moved on. On the other hand, you have several guys that were on all these special teams units last year, and now they're starting. So you have to be a little bit more, not quite as heavy-handed about where you're going to use them on your special teams unit. So there's a lot of turnover on special teams as well. And one thing Limbo was just quite honest about, too, he said, hey, I need my regulars, my returners, my guys we're counting on to be a little bit better as well. So Limbo, a very positive guy, but a very honest guy as well. I thought he gave a very honest assessment last week. This group will keep getting better because they have the best special teams coordinator in the country who's, coaching them along, bringing them along. But, yeah, certainly for the expectations we have for them, even the penalty at the end of the half that lets Mississippi State go ahead and kick another field goal was potentially could have been costly, even though I thought it was a ticky-tack call.
Absolutely. It was a good Saturday night, obviously from the standpoint of South Carolina getting the win. You also had Alshon Jeffrey getting his jersey retired. And overall, a great atmosphere in Williams-Brice Stadium. We'll talk about that coming up. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on a Reaction Monday.
Movies, TV shows, books, podcasts, and more. It's What Women Binge with Melissa Joan Hart and her friend Amanda Lee.
Talking about the SAG strike.
A large portion of SAG lives on their residuals. When I did Nickelodeon, since 1993, haven't seen a dime on Clarissa.
Right.
And they want me to come promote it when it launches on Paramount Plus or it's back on Nickelodeon. And it's like, I would love to, but they won't pay me. So I'm like, I'm not going to do it because I'm not going to work for free when there's no benefit for me.
What Women Binge, wherever you listen.
Here on The Game.
It's Reaction Monday.
Sponsored by Carolina Honda Powerhouse. CarolinaHonda.com.
Your home of the Gamecocks in the Midlands. 107.5 The Game. Also heard on the Grand Strand at 100.3 The Game. And in the PD at 100.5 The Game in Florence.
Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on a Reaction Monday. Tyler and Wes along with you, recapping South Carolina's 37-30 win over Mississippi State on Saturday night to improve to 2-2 on the season. One thing that did not happen on Saturday night was a special teams touchdown, which means the Loyola special teams touchdown contest rolls over to another week. The pot up to $500 as the Gamecocks head into Neyland Stadium on Saturday night. If they can get a special teams touchdown on Saturday night, somebody will win $500 come Monday morning when Bill and Preston announce a winner live on the air on the early game. Head on over to 1075game.com this week to register. Once again, you do have to register each and every week. Don't miss your chance in the Loyola special teams touchdown contest. Obviously, the win was huge on Saturday night. Very cool moment at halftime with Alshon Jeffrey getting his jersey retired. I'd never seen Alshon Jeffrey in person. He's every bit of the size and stature that he's built to be, a massive, massive human being, and very cool to see him get his recognition at Williams-Brice Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, it was well-deserved. And, I mean, this dude was everything he was billed to be and more at South Carolina from the moment that he sort of broke out against Kentucky his freshman year. The thing about Steve Spurrier, if you showed you could go make plays, he was going to feed you. And Spurrier would go after him time after time. Everybody in the stadium knew they were going to try to get the ball to one. And, it didn't matter. Even when he was covered, he wasn't covered because he'd use those big hands and that wide body to go up there and make plays. And so Alshon, very cool moment to see his name and number lit up on the press box officially. And shouts to him. Congrats to him. I mean, just very, very well deserved.
And as expected, with it being the first SEC home game of the season, a great atmosphere at Williams-Brice Stadium on Saturday night. I've seen a lot of tweets from various people in the Mississippi State fan base, and everything that I've seen, all of them overwhelmingly positive about Mississippi State getting to come into Williams-Brice Stadium, which, again, it's not something we get as often anymore with how the schedules have changed over the past 10 years, but Mississippi State fans seemingly having nothing but great things to say about their experience in Willie B on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking this left field lounger Mississippi State, a pretty sizable Mississippi State account, apparently that goes around and has been to several different SEC stadiums and environments. Very impressed with Williams-Brice Stadium. Going as far, South Carolina fans, maybe give a little credit to the administration for continuing to tweak the in-game experience because you're starting to see opponents come in. Mississippi State obviously hasn't been here in forever.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going as far as saying, hey, Mississippi State administration, we need to copy some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really cool. This, again, Left Field Lounger account on Twitter saying the experience at Williams-Brice was unlike any other, almost felt like a party rather than a football game. The athletic department of South Carolina has done a fantastic job of making a trip to a game worthwhile. You can't get an experience like that from the couch. That's something South Carolina's talked about a ton, making a reason for you to get away from your 60-inch TV that you got from integrated media and go to the actual stadium. Continuing the quote here, between the pregame performance, sandstorm, light show, it was hard to beat. The Carolina faithful creates a hostile environment. And interesting that they use that terminology. One of the recruits I talked to yesterday, Desmond Green, 2026 offensive lineman from Timberland, said, quote, it was like a party with a football game in the middle of it. I thought that was one of the better recruit reactions I've maybe ever heard. And yeah, that is kind of how it felt. It was like, yeah, there's a football game going on, but lots of sort of entertainment value all the way around.
Right.
And packed house again. Once again, a true sellout.
Yep.
I always talk about the difference between a sellout and a true sellout. I mean, that place was packed and rocking on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. I've now that was my second game at Williams-Brice Stadium, but I feel like it, in my opinion, it's kind of like football game meets rave, especially when you have sandstorm going on. But yeah, electric crowd all night Saturday night, certainly stayed engaged in the game. And I'll say this, Mississippi State, it's one of the fan bases I got the opportunity to engage with at Georgia a couple years ago when they came to town back in 2017. One of the more nicer, I'd say, level-headed fan bases in the SEC, because, of course, you have your Alabamas and LSUs, some extreme fans on that side. But I feel like Mississippi State, definitely a good, level-headed fan base. I didn't see any problems out of them coming in here on Saturday night, and it was great to see that they had a good time in Willoughby, despite falling a little bit short to the Gamecocks on Saturday night.
I thought they traveled pretty well, man.
It seemed like it.
To be, obviously, that's a long trip. Nobody really has high expectations for that Mississippi State football team right now.
Sure.
Obviously, there's certainly a number of, hey, my kid plays on the team, so I'm going to travel. You're going to get that. But I thought they had a good group just walking around, looking at the tailgates and stuff. Lots of people there, solid crowd from them. And yeah, they don't really have the reputation of being a fan base that is going to cause a lot of problems either. So all the way around, I thought a good atmosphere, good game.
I feel like the Cowbells kind of give them a bad rap at home because those things can be obnoxious, which obviously you're not allowed to take those on the road. I think in all SEC stadiums now those are banned outside of their home venue. So outside of that, I don't think they're really obnoxious.
No, they're not. Real quick, Tyler.
Yeah.
Completely non-Gamecock related.
Oh, boy.
No. Are you interested in the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce storyline or not interested whatsoever?
I'm interested, not as much as our buddy Colin Taylor, which we are definitely going to talk about that because me and him are going to be together for the next 3 hours doing the halftime show.
I'm teeing y'all up then.
Yeah,
I'm setting it up for y'all.
I'm more intrigued by it than anything else. I mean, hey, props to Travis Kelce. Shoot your shot, man. And he seems to have gotten it. So I think he's living the dream of a lot of guys out there. Now, I'm interested to see what the breakup album is going to look like in a couple years when they inevitably break up, because that seems to always be the case. But hey, hats off to Travis Kelce. What a baller.
Yeah, the fact it's kind of played out so publicly is, first of all, it's a little bit just strange.
Sure.
Cameras, I know you're a celebrity. Yeah. You're used to it, but good grief. It's got to be exhausting.
Well, the funny thing to me, and these rumors have been circulating for a while, but to see her actually in the stadium yesterday, wow, this is really happening. She's sitting next to his mom in the press box. She's into the game. She's going crazy when he scores the touchdown. Wow, this is really a thing. That's crazy.
Well, clearly, I believe you can safely say it had gone a little bit further than we knew, because the public stuff is all, they want to hang out.
Right. And they're doing more than hanging out.
If she's at the game with his mom, then clearly, I don't know if they're dating or not, but it's clearly it's a story. But the great part is Travis Kelce shooting his shot publicly, and good for him.
You miss 100% of the shots you never take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with myself and Colin Taylor coming up as Reaction Monday rolls along here on the game.
For over 3 decades, nobody has had a wrestling career like Arn Anderson. Conrad Thompson gets all the stories with Arn.
Would you rather take the cactus bump from the apron to the floor or give Ric Flair your debit card pin?
Number one, I don't have a debit card, but if you think I'd give him my American Express.
Yeah, there you go. Same thing.
You know, I've been poor most of my adult life up until about the age of 25. I cannot be poor again.
Check out Arn every week, wherever you listen.